When white Americans think about fascism, they think about World War II, and they don't think about indigenous genocide or enslavement, and that's the problem that we're having right now. They want to say that the cops are the Gestapo. The cops, honey, they're the cops. They're the cops. They're the military. They're the same military and cops that did the Trail of Tears. They're the same military and cops that went and took people back to slavers. That is who you're dealing with. The same cops you didn't care about during George Floyd and Trayvon Martin and all of these things, vigilantes and, armed vigilante groups that you didn't care about. That's what's happening right now. What you are seeing is what America is on a fundamental level. It is not post-Weimar Europe. It is America. And one of the biggest problems, and I say this all the time, one of the biggest problems with white leftists, and I say this as someone on the very, very, very far left, is that most of the books written that white leftists prize are written about Europe. They are not written about America. They do not think about America. They do not keep America in mind. So when we get into situations like this, the continuation of 400 years of fascism, white people are like, oh God, it's World War II. No, it is the same as it was yesterday, except for now it is happening to you. That's what makes it worse, that it's happening to more people. When these things just happen to black people, black Americans, nobody gives a fuck but black Americans. Okay? Nobody cares. Now that it's happening to you and you feel like you need to be afraid, now you want to call it fascism. It was always fascism. It was always fascism. It was fascism before World War II. So what are you going to do now that you know what America is?
I think part of the reason why white Western leftists are often hella insufferable is because they don't really have any skin in the game. Like, it's a lot of middle class, Caucasian, American-born, regular individuals who really don't have any skin in the game of, U.S. imperialism and capitalism. But if you're a leftist of color, or you have family in the global south, or you're some other group, like that, it's like you became a leftist off of experience, and this shit has real ramifications and real consequences for you. And it gives you a sense of urgency because you and or your family in the global south is going to be directly affected by what America does. And you being a person of color, you're more likely to be affected by capitalism. So, I don't know. I think that's why they're so insufferable. I think they're unserious a lot of the time because they don't have a reason to be serious. So, yeah.
Left-wing academics. Left-wing academics don't need the gym. They build their strength by pulling the ladder up on poor people. The same people who will never be invited to their think tank about wealth redistribution. So they speak up and talk down from their podium-shaped soapbox to an audience of people who already agree with them. The university industrial complex absorbs all forms of radicalism and makes it civilized, turning dissent into a consumer choice, protest into product, and the yellow jacket into a shiny pink bow. Speaking truth to power in double-spaced Times New Roman means they can critique the very system that they actively benefit from. Doing the work consists of publishing a paper behind the paywall that no one outside their university can read, using language no one outside their university can understand, about people who will never set foot inside one. Congratulations, your oppression now has inclusion criteria. When academics got recruited, they got given a lanyard and a dictionary of liberation with about 10 to 15 buzzwords that are so vague they could literally mean anything. But at least they can wear their doctorate martens to the lecture hall and drink free coffee in conferences they had to pay to speak at, and attend diversity workshops where white people talk about intersectionality like they understand it firsthand. They say borders are man-made and we need more third spaces, but they can't break free from their echo chamber. And with no plan to reach people who aren't already in the fold, their defense strategy is to look down their nose at idiots who don't have a college degree so they must be stupid, because moral superiority is the back door for class hatred. A smug satisfaction in not having an answer for the people you're meant to be helping. So for academics, the revolution will be sterilised and peer-reviewed in obscure journal articles that you don't have access to. The rise of the far right is largely unexamined in left-wing academia. They think it's beneath their pay grade and beyond analysis. But when marginalised communities are told they should care about politics, but all they get is morality without material solutions, you create the very conditions for fascism to flourish. The academic left stopped knocking on doors and handing out flyers, retreating from the street to find their seat in a seminar. While the right were fear-mongering and turning scared people against foreigners, the academy were workshopping titles for a conference about ontologies of revolution. Why is there a baby there? Dear academics, this isn't a question, it's more of a comment. When you try to build a fairer society but just use language that excludes people, you silently reproduce the power structures you claim to stand against. Using words like accessibility, inclusivity and empowerment, but never mentioning who grants access, who gets included and where the power comes from, means you just preach inequality and signal elitism. Because deep down, you don't want to change the world. You just want to theorize its decline and get cited for it. Can you hold this?
Did you know that policing and how black communities are policed has its roots in slavery? So, the first policing of black bodies occurred on the plantation. Instead of using the justice system to prosecute enslaved Africans, slave owners would instead use brutality as punishment. They created slave codes to control the actions of enslaved Africans and to prevent escape and rebellion. Laws permitted any white person to punish any enslaved person who stepped out of line without fear of any criminal sanction. That means that every white person was a law enforcement officer to a black person. The first slave patrols were formed in 1704 in South Carolina, and they're considered to be the first form of police forces in the South. Now, unlike most police forces at the time, slave patrols were very well formed, and they were very efficient for protecting the institution of slavery. Now, as police forces began to form in the South, they were put under the same control as the same government body that controlled the slave patrols. After slavery ended, things didn't get any better for black people, because after slavery came convict leasing. This is what is often called slavery by another name. The police were used to arrest black people for petty crimes like being unemployed or eating leftover food or sitting in the wrong chair, and then they would sell black people back into slavery. This was the first iteration of what is now known as mass incarceration. So our current system of policing was built on a foundation that was designed to prevent black people from being free in their movement. This has a direct correlation with the over-policing of black communities that we see today. Think about how black communities are policed today, and you'll see the link. Stop and frisk policies. They allow police officers to stop black people who've committed no crimes and force black people to present their IDs. Does that sound familiar? Black people being stopped and forced to show their freedom papers? 150 years ago, black people weren't safe to travel in their own communities without fear of being stopped and harmed for no reason. That still happens today. Remember Trayvon Martin? He done nothing wrong, and his life was taken because someone who wasn't a police officer thought they had the right to police him. The institution of policing is built on a foundation that was designed to target black people. The reason we see so much injustice in policing against black people is because that's how it was designed to be. Throughout the history of the U.S., the justice system has continued to progress and evolve to keep black people down and entangled. Slavery transitioned into the old Jim Crow, and the old Jim Crow transitioned into the new Jim Crow that we live under today.
They should have told you that in California, your ass used to receive a check for killing Native Americans. They should have told you that at a certain point, they had set up a thing called the California Eugenics Office, which, for those who do not know, is basically a form of human neutering to certain ethnic groups who we deem the offspring of those would be unfit. Typically targeting blacks, Mexicans, Native Americans. So for those who do not know what I'm talking about, so in between, I'd say, the early 1800s and the late 1800s, there was a thing called the California Genocide. For those who do not know, one of the highest concentrations of Native Americans in the United States was in California, obviously. The massacre of these people, of very numerous tribes, not just the Miwoks and the Navajos, for those who might have been here, also the Yuki. There was another one called the Chasumwa, I might be saying the name incorrectly. The massacre started, of course, with the Spanish when they had first set up stop here and had their whole mission system built in where the Native Americans were at the lowest class. Then even when they got their ass kicked by Mexico, Mexico came over here, but because Mexico was colonized with that fucking fucked up, sick colonizer mindset, they even did the same thing, dare I say, almost having some comparisons to slavery with Native Americans. Then when the Californians, when what was America at the time started coming over here, for example, to take over, to fight with the Mexican, then when we have the California Gold Rush in 1848, you started seeing more of that. You started seeing where the actual government, U.S. government, would pay American citizens to murder indigenous peoples or Native Americans just to keep the settlers safe, quote unquote. The reason why I felt motivated to talk about this is because humans, we can be some of the cruelest, sickest people in the world. And there's no such thing as, oh, that shit happened 400 years ago and it can never happen again. It's like I always say when people talk about the transatlantic slave trade or slavery in Africa. I always love to remind people, hey, buddy, you do know there's modern day slavery in Africa right now, right? You do know that, right? If you go to Tunisia, Libya, some parts of Sudan and South Sudan, you do know that they still have modern day slave trade out there, right? You do know when you come to America, you do know when you come to our country, there is genuine human sex trafficking here. You do know that, right? You do know when you go to Sacramento, Sacramento is one of the capitals in the human sex trafficking capital. Look it up. I'm sorry, one of the capitals in the human sex trafficking trade. Look this shit up. Look it up. So, I don't know, man.
In addition to being in the land that was stolen from Native Americans and the United States economic growth that was created from the labor of foundational Black Americans that they have never been compensated for that benefited white people, yours is in the wages that your ancestors were allowed to earn and the property that they were allowed to own and pass down through inheritance. Because those are things that Black, Brown, Indigenous, and other people of color were excluded from doing. The Indian Removal Act, the Homestead Act, alien land laws, Chinese exclusion, Jim Crow, Mexican repatriation, the Social Security Act that corn is subsidized, the Wagner Act, redlining, and restrictions on non-white immigrants becoming citizens of the United States are just a few of the measures that were put in place to make sure that white people were able to get theirs at the expense of and to the exclusion of Black, Brown, Indigenous, and other people of color. So if you don't know where yours is, then I suggest that you join Black, Brown, Indigenous, and other people of color because we are telling you that it is being taken by white supremacist capitalist patriarchy. But your question reminds me of a bunch of people who are waiting for a bus on a rainy day, which stinks for everybody. And a car comes by, runs a red light, and hits a pedestrian in the crosswalk. And when the ambulance arrives to attend to the person who's been hit in the crosswalk, you jump in the way of the medics and you say, "I've been waiting for the bus, where's my ride?"
After Bacon's Rebellion, racial division was created by codifying racial inequality into what becomes the United States, and the reason why it was done was to perpetually prevent class unity. Discussions in the anti-racism sphere are about addressing racial inequality and working towards healing that racial divide because racial unity is required in order to achieve class unity. People like you want to dismiss race as a distraction because it doesn't affect you. You believe that if only we would stop talking about race, then we can collectively focus on working together towards class unity. The thing is, for European Americans who want class unity, you need to start listening to these discussions and working towards racial unity because people of the global majority in the United States are not going to be able to work with European Americans towards class unity until European Americans learn to stop harming us. That is about race. It is not a both sides argument, and it does not go both ways. Throughout United States history, European Americans have been upholding systems of oppression that harm people of the global majority. People of the global majority in the United States have never upheld systems of oppression that harm European Americans. So asking us to put race aside to work towards class unity is like asking us to work in a pit of snakes. They might not all be poisonous, but we have no way of knowing which ones are. And especially in the case of some of you, it's like asking us to work with a coworker whom, with the support and knowledge of ownership, comes to work every morning, punches us in the face, immediately denies doing it, wonders why we're not doing our job as well as they are, goes home and feels that they are entitled to earning more because of their superior work ethic, but feels that still they're not being paid enough. So they come back to work the next day, and around the water cooler, they say to everybody, "Man, I'm so tired of how we're all being exploited by ownership. Our wages suck, our benefits suck. What we all need to do is band together and stick it to ownership." Turns around, punches us in the face again, and immediately denies it. And if you're a European American who's thinking, "But I'm not racist. I know that I am not one of the poisonous snakes. I know that I am not throwing any punches," rather than asking us to set race aside and to risk our safety to help you, help yourself by removing the poisonous snakes from the pit. You are given proximity to them. You know which ones are poisonous. You are given tools to remove them that don't involve using your bare hands the way that we have to. Rather than asking us to turn the other cheek, help yourself by intercepting the punch. You are given the proximity to do that without having to take the punch or to throw your own fists. You can help yourself achieve class unity by listening to and learning from these discussions and learning how to uplift and unify by race. Reparations is about addressing racial inequality and healing the racial divide that is required if we are ever going to achieve class unity and live in a society that is anti-exploitation and anti-oppression, as is land back and sovereignty and respect of treaty rights for Native Americans. When we live in a society that collectively wants to acknowledge and redress exploitation of Black Americans and Native Americans, we will already live in a society that is far less exploitative of the rest of us.
A Department of Justice attorney has been fired and charged with felony assault after he allegedly threw a sandwich at a federal officer in Washington, D.C. The incident happened late Sunday on U Street, where federal agents were deployed under President Trump's recent crime crackdown. Sean Charles Dunn, an internal affairs specialist for the DOJ's criminal division, no relation to Straight Arrow News employee Sean Dunn, reportedly called a Customs and Border Protection agent a fascist before hurling a sandwich at his chest. He was arrested on the spot and admitted to the act, saying, quote, "I did it. I threw a sandwich." Attorney General Pam Bondi announced Dunn's firing, calling him part of the deep state, while U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro said he thought it was funny, but now he faces up to 8 years in prison. But what do you think? Can this attorney muster up a good case, or is he in a pickle?